On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfils disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfils remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfils 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
And I'm Mike Putchell.
Tonight's episode is entitled The Popcorn Man. I just wanted to bring up, in real time as we record this, there's a Netflix series on Lyle and Erik Menendez that has come out and sort of everyone's kind of talking about it at the time, or at this time right now. And it looks like the Menendez brothers are going to be let out fairly soon from everything that I'm hearing. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because they have been in prison for 35 years. And, of course, Keith Kutzka, who is the last of the Monfils to be released, he was in prison for 27 years. So another 8 years past Kutzka. And the reason I want to bring this up is that they've done their time, just like the Monfils 6 did their time. But what this Netflix series did is it's clearing their name. It's people aren't going to think of them as the rich kids who killed their parents anymore. And with our podcast, the Monfils 6 podcast, that's what we're attempting to do. We're attempting to clear the good names of the people who were convicted of killing Tom Monfils. So I just wanted to bring that similarity up, just because one of the things I found out was that the second Menendez trial, the first one ended in a mistrial, but the second one started just 10 days after the O.J. Simpson trial ended. And again, we bring this up because why were people not aware of the Monfils trial? In part, a big reason was the O.J. Simpson trial was overshadowing it. But then again, just a few days later, the Menendez second trial begins. So that's another reason why probably people weren't paying as much attention to the Monfils trial.
Yeah, Damon, I want to just point out some things that I hope you also recognize as differences, though, is that two things. One, with the Menendez brothers, we know that they did it, right? They killed their parents. And whereas, I mean, we haven't really given our thorough final opinions, but I think people already kind of know that we don't believe the Monfils 6 are guilty. So there is a distinction there. The Menendez brothers are actually killers. Again, aside from the pedophilia allegations with the father, still killed him. But then second, the Menendez brothers, did they get life in prison? Do you know?
I think they got life without the possibility of parole.
Yeah, so, there's a little bit of a difference there too, because I mean, yeah, they might be getting their name cleared, but they're getting out on parole potentially. But they still were convicted correctly. You see those differences, right?
Yeah, I do. So Charles Bowers stated that on the day of Monfils' disappearance, so November 21st, 1992, he saw a very dark, well-built, athletic man, about 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, a black man with no facial hair, walk through the area of the beaters and head north to the converting department. in a statement he made to police on December 11th, 1992. Bowers estimated that he had seen the man at approximately 7:30 a.m. There were two other African American men working the night shift in the converting department who would have been in the plant around 6 a.m. One was Charles Binns and one was James Johnson. Binns fits Bowers' description of who he saw almost perfectly, except for the fact that Binns had some facial hair. I think he described it as a Don Johnson, so that if you remember Miami Vice, Don Johnson kind of had a 5 o'clock shadow. But why might he, Bowers, not have seen that 5 o'clock shadow on his face?
Well, it sounds like he didn't get a real good look. It was kind of like from a distance, but then also, it might have been like a partial silhouette, maybe. It didn't sound to me like he got a real clear look at the person.
That too, and if it's short enough, if it's just like stubble, and then Ben's skin is dark enough, then you might not have seen it. It might have looked clean shaven from a distance. James Johnson and Rey Moore are racially mixed. Both are light complexion African Americans. Today, Bowers has told the authors that the time frame where he saw the man could have matched up when they both had been punched in. So this brings us again back to the point where we brought up, I think twice before, the fact that they weren't allowed to wear wristwatches in the factory, and it caused a lot of problems in this case, didn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know if, like they point out in the book, no one's really gonna have a good, like, pinpointed timeline of just when you saw somebody. It's not really something like, oh yeah, I saw Damon at 5:14 in the afternoon today. It's not really something that you're gonna note.
So Bowers was a recent hire. Most people did not know him, and he did not know most of the people who were working at the James River plant. Bowers believed that Rey Moore was the only African American working at the mill because that's what the investigators had told him. Do you think that the investigators knew of the other two people working at the mill, or do you think that they were sort of just trying to get Bowers to pin it on Rey Moore?
Yeah, I think that it definitely could be something that they knew, but as we've covered a lot, and we'll cover also in tonight's episode, they ignore those things because they just want to get their guy.
Yeah, we've established that for sure. Bowers identified Moore because he was the only African American whose photo was in the Green Bay Press Gazette with the other Monfils suspects. Experts state that 60 to 80% of wrongful convictions occur because there was a mistaken witness identification.
What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that, your friends, relatives, and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
James Gilliam is an experienced con man, career criminal, and convicted murderer. Gilliam was a witness for the state on day 16, despite having been convicted on at least 6 different occasions prior to taking the witness stand. He'd also served time in prison twice, and he would go on to kill his wife, Katrina, in front of their 14-year-old son after the trial in October of 2000. So this Gilliam guy, he's got a long record. Why on earth would they put him on as a witness in the Monfils case, do you think, with that sort of background?
I don't think they care about the background. He was just giving them information that was helpful to their case.
And we brought this up a couple times before as well. Do you think the defense attorneys for the Monfils 6 were aware of his record?
Yeah, I do. And this is another example where I wish that we had like full transcripts of the trial, because it's pretty normal for whether it be the defense that would use him as a witness or the prosecution in this case, the other side would use that against him to destroy his credibility. And I hope that they did that. I don't know if they did, though.
It just seems to me if I was on the jury and I heard about that guy's background, immediately I would not believe anything that he had said.
Yeah, me too.
On April 12th, 1995, the day the Monfils arrests were made, police had also taken Gilliam into custody. This time he was accused of using a butcher knife in order to threaten Connie Manders, a woman who wanted to end a relationship with him. Gilliam ended up in the Brown County Jail the same time as the Monfils defendants. He claimed at this time that Rey Moore had talked to him about the Monfils' death and that Moore had confessed to him. The police may have believed this happened because Gilliam is also an African American. What are your thoughts on Rey Moore confessing to this Gilliam guy in prison or in jail, county jail?
It sounds unlikely. I mean, not only one, because he talks about how when he was in jail, he was really going through a rough time mentally and wasn't talking really with anybody because he was just beside himself with where his life was going. But also, there's nothing to confess. We've established many times throughout the show the inconsistencies in this case and the evidence, so he didn't do it. He wasn't there.
Also, this is before the trial even took place. It's not as though he's been convicted and he's serving his sentence, and so he decides to confess. I mean, they just picked him up probably a few hours earlier, and there would be no reason for him to start talking like that.
Right.
In a signed statement to Winkler, Gilliam said, Ray told me he got involved about 2 days earlier as Kutska got a hold of him. Ray said Kutska told him Monfils was going around blabbing his mouth and he was going to get them all fired. Rey Moore said he did not say one word in jail to anyone as he was depressed and he had just wanted to keep to himself. And Moore further stated that he had never even seen Gilliam. What do you think, in terms of Monfils going around blabbing his mouth and getting them all fired, what do you think was meant by that?
You mean with what Gilliam said?
Yeah, how would he have gotten people fired besides Kutska? Because Kutska is the only one who stole the cord.
I really don't know what Gilliam was talking about. I mean, the first sentence that he said about the 2 days before Monfils' death, I knew that that was a lie because there wasn't even 2 days to have all that happen. We know the tape story. Kutska really didn't even have the tape for 2 days before all this happened. So right from the get-go, that story was made up.
Yeah, so uh, Kutska didn't get the tape until the night before, which was a Friday. So when he finally had the tape, he made calls to several coworkers and several union heads, but no call to Moore. So why did Gilliam say this? And the authors speculate it's pretty easy to figure out. If you scratch my back, I will scratch yours. For nearly 2 years in 1993 and 1994, Gilliam had been a paid informant to the police. Gilliam didn't care if what he said about Moore aligned with the facts. He'd been making deals with the police for years, and this was all just business as usual for him. On the day of his sentencing, so again, this would have been for the butcher knife incident, Gilliam had told his lawyer to tell the DA that he had something to offer in the Monfils case. And because of his cooperation, Gilliam received 2 years of probation. And then, of course, in October of 2000, he murdered his wife in front of their 14-year-old son. So, what are your thoughts on the DA dealing with Gilliam and giving him this really light sentence for probation? He didn't spend any time in jail after he threatened this woman with a butcher knife. I mean, that's Sakowski for you, right?
Yeah, and I don't even know what he would have received as far as sentencing for that, because it sounds like I don't want to say he just threatened her. I mean, that's serious, but like he didn't stab her with it, right?
I don't. It says threatened.
So I don't even know if he would have gotten a heavier sentence. He may have not been in jail anyway in 2000 when he killed Katrina. So, but either way, it does say that Sakowski will get his information from anybody as long as it fits his storyline.
Yeah. The farther we go along, Sakowski just looks worse and worse. The authors contacted Gilliam about an interview. So this is again after he had gone to prison for murdering his wife. And he said that yes, he would do an interview. But then the authors point out that he requested a $100 cherry wood radio in return for the interview. So what does that say to you, Mike?
That he likes making deals. He knows how to work the system.
Memento mori. Remember, you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite, as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. So I mentioned to you, Mike, that I was going to be going to a picnic that we get together every year with Bula's family. Bula was the really good friend of mine who I knew for decades, who sort of inspired the whole idea for the business. And he died at 41. And when I was there at the picnic, one of Bula's uncles was there, who is Hmong, and he doesn't speak English at all. And one of the revelations that I came across about Bula was that every Friday, Bula would go to this uncle's house, and he would read his mail for him. He would translate the mail. And in all the years, the decades that I knew Bula, he never mentioned that to me once. And that just got me thinking about this is an idea that, the fact that Bula did that kind gesture, that should be remembered. That should be remembered always. And this idea that this idea of a second death. Can you explain what the second death is?
Yeah, the second death is kind of the time when it can be a different length of time depending on the person that passed. But so when somebody dies, people who are still around, family, friends, they'll still remember the person during their lifetime. But then once, as the years go by and that person's death gets more and more in the distant past, the people who remembered that person and knew that person, they pass on too. And so once we get to the point where everybody who knew that person that originally had died, once all these people start dying years later, and once they're all gone, the second death happens there, when there's no longer anybody living that would remember the first death that occurred. And this is something that these videos can counter. We've talked before many times how these videos really are a permanent fixture. They can be viewed anywhere, anytime, as long as the internet still exists, and I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. So these are moments where people can find the video. Again, we've talked how the QR code is at the gravesite. People can go to the cemetery, just be looking around. I was just doing this recently. I was at a cemetery a couple of weeks ago on a bike ride and just happened to rest. And I was looking at people's gravestones, and I thought, I was curious about some of these people's lives. I looked at people who died relatively young. I wondered what happened, and it just makes you curious about what went on. With these videos, there is no second death because people still continue learning about people. If it's meaningful to you to have a legacy where people still learn things about you even after people that you knew first person are gone, people can still continue to learn about the life of somebody years, decades, maybe even a century or two after somebody passes on.
And we're back. When the authors interviewed Gilliam, he contradicted his court testimony. He said Moore was innocent, and Moore had tried to stop the Monfils 6. At one point, Gilliam claimed Sue Monfils, of course that's Tom's wife, was having an affair with a Milwaukee drug kingpin. The authors thought that they had wasted a trip, but they soon realized that they were just listening to someone that was trying to please his listeners. They could not fathom how Gilliam was allowed to testify at the Monfils trial, and that his testimony was a stumbling block for the remaining 5 during the appeals process. What did you think about the Milwaukee Sue Monfils having an affair with the Milwaukee drug kingpin?
I didn't really even think of it at all. I knew it was just all nonsense. I think this guy just is a career liar. Just makes up stuff.
Yeah, I think the authors, when they heard that, they just realized that this guy he was spouting nonsense. In 1992, Dale, Bastian, and Winkler were at the tissue chest where Monfils' body had been found. When asked by Winkler to speculate what might have happened, Bastian freely told Winkler what he thought, and the authors point out that this was not a wise choice. Bastian suggested someone pushed Monfils' head into the vat wall, causing the injury. Bastian also suggested that someone was shaking the tape in Monfils' face. This would come back to hurt Rey Moore, as in the Fox Den scenario. Moore was the one that people were saying had been shaking the tape in Monfils' face. Bastian was just guessing at what might have happened. Afterward, Winkler wrote in his detail sheet, "I think Bastian just confessed to killing Monfils." Why do you think Winkler wrote that?
Because I think any type of comment, he thinks that they're guilty. I laughed when I read that because it's like, that's his go-to assumption. Like, you could say anything. Like, I was in the parking lot that morning, and he'd say, I think he just confessed to killing Tom Monfils. He just is extravagant in that regard.
So let's listen to a short clip about Dale Bastian talking about his turning 60 while in prison and maybe not getting out.
Dale Bastian is now serving his life sentence at Green Bay Correctional.
Well, I'll be 60 on my next birthday, so I don't know what to say. I suppose a very good chance of dying in prison.
6 months into the Monfils investigation, David Weiner was at a co-worker's wedding when he heard someone utter the word Rodell, and this caused him to remember seeing Bastian and Mike Johnson carrying something heavy like a ladder near the vat. So when David Weiner heard this, he immediately contacted the police and said, "When I heard the word Rodell, now I remember Bastian and Mike Johnson carrying something heavy like a ladder near the vat." Does that make any sense to you?
The Rodell comment? No. No, it doesn't. And well, they talk more about it in the book later, so we'll go into it more, but there's no explanation of that. I don't get that at all. How do you hear a name at a wedding and then suddenly you realize, oh yeah, I have this memory of a ladder being carried by the by the vat? It's just weird. It's a weird thing.
Remarkably, by the time of the trial, Weiner's sudden recollection of carrying something heavy like a ladder at 6:30 a.m. had become Bastian and Johnson carrying Monfils' body at 7:45 a.m. So an hour and 15 minutes later. Johnson and Bastian both deny being anywhere near the chest on November 21st, 1992. So again, we talked about Gilliam being allowed to testify, and now this sort of David Weiner and this crazy sudden recollection that he hears this weird word. And then at 6:30, he says that he thought he saw them carrying something heavy like a ladder, and suddenly there's a time jump by an hour and 15. How do you think the police justified that and the prosecution?
I don't know. Again, it's another thing. Where was the defense countering this? Were they doing that? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I wanted to add real quick, just with the Bastian thing, him talking to Winkler and giving him his opinion or thoughts, just freely talking with Winkler. That's another example of what I've brought up before about how people, they trust the police. And that's not a good thing to do if your workplace is being investigated for a homicide. At that point, anybody could be a suspect. If you work at the mill, you probably shouldn't be talking to the detective about what you think happened. But I think, again, it's another example of how people just trusted police. Oh, I can talk with them. I'm innocent, I don't know necessarily that they're on my side or anything like that, but I didn't do it, so I can give them my opinion, even though it's not a good idea. You should just kind of keep it to yourself.
Yeah, that's what the authors stated, that it was not a wise choice for him to do that. Mill worker Jim Boucher was known as the Popcorn Man because he gave out popcorn to those in his work area. Mike Johnson told WRFV-TV Channel 5 in Green Bay, when asked if he knew Monfils, Johnson told the reporter he knew him as the Popcorn Man. At some point after the interview, Johnson realized Monfils was not the Popcorn Man and that it was Boucher. At this point, Johnson told police that he did not know Monfils. When the police saw the TV interview, they accused him of lying. And then DA Sakowski promised not to show that TV interview at the trial, but then he did use the tape. And for Johnson and Johnson's family, they were devastated at this. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. Don't you think that the fact that he told the reporter that he thought Monfils was the Popcorn Man is sort of proof that he had no idea who Monfils was to begin with?
Yeah, for sure. And it shows you, again, how Sakowski and his crew, as the authors like to say, but the ADA, they like to, they'll use anything, against somebody. And it sounds like, in this case, Eric Stern, Johnson's defense lawyer, did try to explain this. Sakowski didn't keep his word.
New episodes of the Monfils 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? We create individual and unique video-based obituaries that will allow anyone reading your local newspaper or visiting the gravesite to view the video and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com.